Hey, you, stop looking at that screen and get a life. That's exactly what we're talking about, how to do today. I'm Spencer. If you don't know me, I like to talk about simple living, frugality, and digital minimalism. And today I want to talk about one of the things that I do, one of my favorite hobbies that helps me get a life, stop scrolling, and find something I'm excited about that takes place in the real world. Let's get into it. I might come up with a different intro after. So one of the big things that I talk about on this channel is ditching digital distraction. It's finding ways out of the scroll so that we can live our lives more meaningfully with intention. But a big part of the problem is oftentimes people don't have anything to move towards. They might be really interested in getting off their device and doing something else with their time, but they have no clue what that something else is or should be. In different times in my life, I felt that same way. It's not that any of us really want to spend our lives staring at a screen, but it's that we really don't know who am I, what am I about, and how do I want to spend my time other than just mindlessly consuming content. YouTube is a bit of a double-edged sword for this type of thing. It can be a really inspiring place where you can learn tons of new information, alert yourself to hobbies that you may not have heard of or been interested in before, and then meet people who can teach you things about these interests. But it can also be a place where you can lose hours and hours going really deep down a rabbit hole. To figure out exactly what it is that you wish to do with your time and what your really ideal way of spending your time is, I encourage you to do some reflection. I think one of the best ways to do that is to just put it out on the page. I like to journal a few times a week at least and really just talk about the things that I'm interested in, the things I've been thinking about, the things I've been worried about. And it kind of helps me center in on what is it that is most important to me in my days, because I can kind of tell that by knowing what am I concerned about? What am I looking forward to? What am I dreaming about? This helps me kind of figure out what is it that I wish to be moving toward. So while journaling and taking time to reflect is a great way to go, no, unfortunately, I can't tell you what your dream way to spend your time is, but I can tell you a little bit about mine. Wildlife photography. If you ask any person in my family, they would tell you that I am an animal person through and through. From a very young age, I loved animals and I loved getting up close with them. I grew up with an interest in people like Steve Irwin and even Jacques Cousteau, and I always wanted to be a wildlife photographer. In fact, I even have this old Steve Irwin toy that I got when I was a kid. His batteries are dead right now. I've been meaning to change them, but when you press a button on him, he goes, "Crikey, Crocs rule. What a ripper." So from a very young age, I loved wildlife and I wanted to be a wildlife photographer before I really knew anything about what that meant. When I made my first YouTube channel back in 2007, all of the videos that were on that channel were basically like tribute videos to certain animals. So like my first video was like a bear video and it was called like the Bear Tribute. And it had a bunch of just photos I pulled off Google Images of different like grizzly bears and like I think polar bears were in one of them. And then it just had like a Motley Crue song over top of it. And while I remained interested and a fan of wildlife throughout my teenage years, it wasn't until 2020 that I really got into the hobby of wildlife photography. In mid 2020, a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands. I had just started in the film industry. I had bought a camera the year before, and I had just been kind of bored wanting to do something. And the only thing I could really do was walk around the woods near my parents' house where I was living at the time. My dad had like a budget Canon zoom that I was able to use on my camera, and I went and took it with me, and I was just taking photos of squirrels and robins and just anything that I could find out there. I still have some of the first photos that I took on that original outing, and they're not the sharpest photos out there, but I was really stoked about what I got, and I was pretty much hooked at that point. By 2021, I got my first mirrorless camera, and I wanted to upgrade my lens as well. I wanted something that was going to be a little bit sharper, that I was going to be able to get some really outstanding results from. And at the time, I was just thinking about optics and I wasn't thinking about portability. So that led me to pick up this lens right here. This is the Canon 500mm FD lens. This thing came out, I believe, in like 1982. This thing is a fully manual focusing lens and it is really, really tough to get a photo with this. Over the last few years, I've kind of gotten out of the hobby of wildlife photography. I've been working more and more and found myself leaving the city less and less. And as a result, this thing has just been collecting dust. You know, there's often this misconception that in the big city, there's nothing but concrete and buildings. There's no trees, there's no wildlife or anything to be found here, but that really couldn't be farther from the truth. I've seen foxes, I've seen coyotes, I've seen deer, and I've seen tons of hawks throughout the city of Toronto, and I see them on a regular basis. At different times in the year, you can even find salmon running up the river through the city of Toronto. So especially in the last year, I've had an interest in getting back out there and doing my thing, just taking some photos, even if it meant bringing my camera with me on my morning walks through the neighborhood and snapping a few photos of the things that I saw. I wanted to get back into doing that in 2025. But part of the problem is this big honkin' lens. This is a lens that pro wildlife photographers would use. You know, somebody who's going somewhere and they're intending to get the shot. This is the lens that they would bring. But this thing is really huge. This is not something that you want to just be carrying around on your little morning walk around the neighborhood in case you see a blue jay or something like that. So after a few very good years with this lens, unfortunately, it's going to go up for sale. Yesterday, I actually, after waiting for like a year and taking a very close look on Facebook Marketplace for the right deal, I finally found a wildlife camera kit that I'd been looking for, and I found it for the best possible price I could. So I drove a couple hours out of the city and I snagged it. This is what I'm going to be shooting on now. This is an OM system, formerly known as Olympus OM1 mirrorless camera. I'm a Sony shooter most of the time, and unfortunately the thing is when you shoot on a camera like this, it looks very beautiful for doing things like YouTube because of that big full frame sensor. That kind of requires big glass when you have a big sensor. And then you wind up in the neighborhood of something like this. The Olympus cameras use another type of sensor that's much smaller called a micro four thirds sensor. And you're able to get very similar reach that you would get with a lens like this, for example. This goes 500 millimeters of reach. This lens here that I got, look at the difference in size, goes in equivalent of 600 millimeters of reach. This is kind of what I wanted this kit because I wanted to remove the barrier between me actually going out and doing the hobby. I wanted to make it even so it didn't have to be that I had to leave the city and, you know, take this giant lens with me like it's a full outing. I'm going on an expedition to go get some wildlife photos. I wanted it to just be a casual thing. I could go out for a walk around the neighborhood, and if I saw a hawk up in the tree, I'd be able to snap a photo of it. And that is what really drew me to this kit. Now I can talk a lot more about the specs of this camera because as a person who works in the film industry, as a camera person, I can talk about specs for days. I have started a second channel where I talk exclusively about camera equipment and my enjoyment of that hobby as well. That will be linked below if this video is actually up yet. Lastly, I will address the point about, you know, people always see something like this. They go, oh, how frugal are you? You bought a bunch of equipment. You're not very frugal. And people love to say stuff like that. It's really, people love to poke holes at anything that they see. For me, this isn't a passing phase. I've been working in the film industry in Canada for the last 6 years. I also have this YouTube channel, which is becoming more and more of an involved thing. And then I've also been doing wildlife photography as a hobby for the last 5 years. So I know that that's something that I very much enjoy doing and want to do more. The best thing about this hobby, and really any sort of hobby in general, if you're able to approach it with a little bit of cleverness to find some good deals, is that you can really get in at any price you want. You don't have to buy a complete like new wildlife kit setup or anything like that. It doesn't have to be a lens like this. You can get in for maybe $100 or even less, depending on what you really want out of the hobby. And then you can grow into it the more you go. You know, like I said, when I started doing it, I borrowed a lens that my dad had. And then once I was kind of wanting a little bit better optics at that point, I borrowed a lens from another person that I knew that was slightly better. So I was shooting for the first year of this hobby. I owned the camera, but I borrowed the lenses. The good thing about photography, especially compared to video, is that in my opinion, photography equipment has kind of already peaked and is already past its peak. And pretty much any photo equipment from the last 10 years is going to be more than adequate for you, especially as a beginner photographer. You can buy a used Canon DSLR for like $200 that will more than meet your needs for wildlife photography for years to come. And again, I want to come back to this point that frugality is not about deprivation. Frugality isn't about going without things just because you're trying to save the most amount of money. Unless you're in a really tough time and you're trying to pay off debt and you have other responsibilities you do need to prioritize, then that definitely does make sense. You know, there was a time when I bought this lens back in 2021, I should have been paying off my debt. I shouldn't have been buying this lens, honestly. If you don't wish to spend money on a whole photographic kit like this, if you want to just get into this and learning more about nature, getting out into nature and having an activity that you can do while there, you can just get into bird watching. With bird watching, you can get all of the benefits of wildlife photography at a fraction of the cost. The only downside is that you're not taking your photos home with you. You just go and you watch, you can take some notes, and then you can go home. But it's still a very fun experience, and I find myself doing that regularly as well. Now, I've had a pair of these Bushnell binoculars for a very long time. I showed them in a video a couple weeks ago when I was talking about being homesick. I don't even know how much these cost, but I have bought a monocular, which is essentially just a single side of this, basically a little telescope on Amazon that was $26, and it gives me more zoom than this thing, and I actually think it might be a little sharper than this thing, but it's just a squinter. You have to squint with your one eye. As far as identifying the birds, there's a few different ways you can go about this. Now, you can use a phone. If you have a smartphone, you definitely can use that. There's great apps out there like Merlin that helps you identify different birds that you see. You can type in their characteristics and then you can identify them off of some photos they'll show you in the app, and it'll tell you all about the species. And I think this is a good use of a smartphone here because you're fully using it as a tool. You're not being distracted. You're not scrolling social media on it. You're using it to help you with your hobby just in a more modern sense. And I have no problem with doing that. But since this is a video about kind of ditching the scrolling, getting away from your phone and getting outside, I do think a better way to go, in a way that I find more fun and more nostalgic, is to just have a birding manual like this. This one, it'll take you all the way through all of the different species, and it'll show you as well like a picture of their foot. It'll show you their size relative to other birds. It will show you a photo that shows like what the male and female plumage looks like, and it'll even show a photo of their egg. You can also get pocket versions of these that are much smaller and that you could just stick in a coat pocket and have with you. And I think that's even more practical for when you're out on the go doing something like this. A lot of times for me, because I'm doing the photography, I'll take the photo, and if I don't know the species, I'll identify it when I get home with one of my books. So I can tell you the cost for this stuff, if you're not doing the photography itself, is very cheap. Like these, again, were kicking around in my family. I got these for free. I'm sure there's somebody you know in your life who can at least let you borrow a pair, if not maybe give you some binoculars. And then you can pick up a book like this. I got this at, I think, Value Village here in Canada, and I believe I paid less than $5 for this book. This is a $5 hobby, and you can get out there and you can enjoy it, and you're not gonna find yourself being caught up in the gear upgrade cycle that so many photographers find themselves in. I hope you found this video interesting today, guys. I hope it wasn't too technical for you. If you wanted it to be more technical, you can check out the other channel that I'm going to be talking about my camera gear on. Right now, that channel is just titled Spencer Campbell, and it's just going to be about technical stuff. So go on over there and check that out if you want to hear more from me on that topic. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any more questions about this or anything else, then feel free to let me know in the comments section. I do still have an Instagram account as well, where I used to post all my wildlife photography during the earlier part of the 2020s. And now I'm going to get back into sharing stuff on there as well. So if you still do have social media and you enjoy checking that stuff out, you can go give me a follow over there at Spencer. I think there's 3 underscores and then adventures. So Spencer's 3 underscores, maybe 4 adventures, and you can find me on there. There will be some wildlife photography coming there in the near future. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.